Good morning, grade 4. Welcome back to the English class. Have you all heard about Mulla Nasruddin? You know who was he? Mulla Nasruddin was a very wise man who lived in a village and people would go to him to seek advice. He was also known as Nasruddin Khoja, and there are a lot of tales out there about him. These tales are funny, lesson-filled, philosophical as well as thought-provoking. So today, let's read one such story. All of you please take your English workbook and turn to page number 37. The name of the story is Mulla Nasruddin and it's chapter 6 of your textbook. Now, please look into your textbook carefully. Read this funny story about Mulla Nasruddin and his neighbor. So this is a story about Mulla Nasruddin and one of his neighbors. So let's hear the story. One day, Mulla Nasruddin met his neighbor on his way back from the town. So one day, Mulla Nasruddin was coming from the town back to his village and he saw one of his neighbors there on the way. The neighbor looked very upset. When Nasruddin asked him why he looked so sad, the man replied, "My house is so small. There is hardly any space for anyone. My mother-in-law, my wife, our 3 children and I live together in that little house. We can barely move around. Please help me, Mulla." So, Mulla was on his way back from the town to his village and on the way he meets one of his neighbors and this neighbor looks so upset. And Mulla was asking him what happened, why is he so upset? And this neighbor replied he was upset about his house being so small. And who all were living in that house? His wife, his mother, his 3 children, they were all living in this small house. And it was such a small house that everyone had barely any space to move around. And he didn't know what to do about this. So he asked Mulla to give him some advice so that he can do something about this. And let's see what Mulla replied. Nasruddin thought for a while and said, "Do you have chickens in your yard?" The man replied, "Yes, I have 10 chickens." So what happened? Mulla asked this neighbor if he had any chickens in his yard. And the neighbor replied that he has 10 chickens in his yard. And then Mulla asked him to keep all these 10 chickens inside the neighbor's house instead of keeping them in the yard. And let's see, the man was surprised to hear Nasruddin's words. He said, "There is no space for us and you are asking me to bring the chickens in too?" And the neighbor got very surprised when Mulla Nasruddin asked him to keep all these chickens inside his house. There was hardly any space for the humans and now how can he bring the chickens also inside the house? So the neighbor wondered why Nasruddin is giving such a suggestion. Then what did Nasruddin reply? "Do as I say," Nasruddin replied calmly. So Nasruddin asked his neighbor not to think much about it and just do what Nasruddin asked him to do. Though the man was unsure of Nasruddin's advice, he went back home and put the chickens in a coop inside the house. So what is a coop? A coop is a structure or a shelter where you keep hen or other fowls safe and secure. Now, even though this neighbor was unsure why Nasruddin asked him to keep all these chickens inside, he just went home and took all the chickens and kept them inside a coop inside his house. 2 days later, when he met Nasruddin, he started complaining again and said, "I put the chickens in the house just as you had asked me to. Now we have lesser space than before and the chickens make so much noise that it irritates everyone present in the house." So what happened? As Nasruddin asked him to do, the neighbor had put all the chickens in a coop inside his house. Now the house was already crowded with all the people living inside, and now that the chickens are also inside the house, there is hardly any space for anyone. So when he met Nasruddin again, he complained to him that the space is even more lesser now. And also the chickens are making so much noise that everyone is getting mad about it. Nasruddin smiled calmly and said, "You have a donkey as well, don't you?" So Nasruddin is asking him, you have a donkey as well, don't you? And without waiting for the neighbor's reply, Nasruddin continued, take your donkey and keep it in your house today. So saying, he walked away. Now Nasruddin was known to be a wise man, so even though the man hesitated, he followed the advice. He went back home and brought his donkey inside the house. So the neighbor was complaining about how the house became even more crowded with the hens. Nasruddin asked him to bring in the donkey also inside the house. And without saying any more, Nasruddin just walked away from this neighbor. Everyone knew that Nasruddin was a very wise man. So if he says something, there should be a point in it. So when Nasruddin asked him to bring in the donkey also inside the house and he just walked away, even though this neighbor hesitated, he just went home and brought the donkey inside his house. The very next day, when the man met Nasruddin, he shouted angrily, my house is so full now that we cannot even breathe. Everyone is unhappy and constantly complaining about the lack of space. So what happened? The next day, when he was walking through the road, he meets Nasruddin again and he was very angry with him. So he was so angry that he shouted at Nasruddin that after bringing all these chickens and the donkey also inside this small house, it got very much crowded that people can't even breathe. And everyone was very angry and everyone was complaining about it all day. He didn't know what to do next. So what did Nasruddin reply then? Nasruddin gently put an arm on his shoulder and said, calm down, my friend, go home and take the animals out of the house. So Nasruddin saw how angry this man was and he tried to calm him down. He placed his arm on his shoulder and with calm words, he asked him to go home and bring all the animals out of the house. The man did as he was told. So like always, the man obeyed Nasruddin's suggestion. So he went home and he took out all the animals outside of his house. Next day, the man went to Nasruddin's house. He hugged Nasruddin and said, thank you, Mulla. Your plan has worked. Now that all the animals are outside, there is enough space in the house for me and my family. I am satisfied with the little house that I live in. So what happened? As Nasruddin suggested, this neighbor went home and took all the animals out of the house. Now he realized that there was enough space in the house already for the people to live in. And he did not realize that earlier. Only after bringing these animals inside, he realized that they had enough space already in the house. So he thanked Nasruddin for his brilliant plan and for making him realize that the house is enough for them. And this man and his family lived happily ever after in this house. So children, I hope you enjoyed this story. There are a lot of stories out there about Nasruddin Mulla. You have to read at least 2 other Mullah stories as an activity for the day. And also don't forget to read this story once again. So children, I hope this was interesting. That's all for today. We'll meet in the next class. Till then, bye.